guys, and welcome back to another video. So I was actually in Procreate and I went back to my OCs folder and I remembered that I actually had a kind of like a little brief thumbnailing-ish kind of sketching session where I was planning out an animation for my OC Masaki, and I remember doing this walk cycle idea of Masaki kind of walking with a potted plant and tripping, and I never ended up doing that idea because I ended up doing this kind of more headshot version for Masaki, which I'll show you guys very briefly. I'll make sure to leave the video in the description if you wish to see the process and the progress of this one in the description. But for today, I thought it would be fun to revisit that other animation idea, so let's go ahead and do that. So I kind of botched up my footage somehow. Well, I didn't botch it. Somehow my recording program just overrided my third recording onto my second recording, so I didn't actually have any recording of me doing kind of like the rough sketch portion, which is where I'm planning out just general shapes and trying to get the animation of Masaki kind of from start to finish. But I don't do it in a very, I guess, efficient way, if that makes sense. I do it kind of frame by frame, moving from the right side to the left side, starting with Masaki kind of waving and then him briefly walking, then tripping and then falling to the ground. And you can see that I have my onion skins on and I'm just sketching and I'm going kind of back and forth whenever I can. Luckily Procreate saves kind of this time-lapse version, so I'm able to show you guys the kind of process of me doing the rough sketch. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is kind of inefficient is that I should have probably did the key frames first and just planned out the general kind of larger animations that I find more, or not animations, the larger frames that I find the most important. And the reason being is that I made the size of Masaki super inconsistent. Here's me trying to fight because I was being kind of pissed off because of the footage being lost, because I lost 42 minutes of footage and it got replaced by 36 minutes of nothing. So it's kind of strange how my program did that, but that's okay. Moving along, we are going to be actually sketching out Masaki on top of the kind of little rough version. So you can see that I've already used 29 layers just on the rough sketch, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of just hide all these layers first. And I know that if I double up my layers, we're not going to exceed the limit, so I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer to draw on top of each rough layer. And as I'm doing the frames in Procreate, for frames, it's basically every layer becomes a new frame. But if you want to bypass that and do like line art, you want to do rough sketching, you want to add coloring and effects to each frame rather than like, you know, each layer kind of thing, you can just make sure that you group your layers into a folder, and every folder will now become a new frame instead of just one singular layer. It's just much easier to organize that way. So this is going to be a mixture of me working in real time, and a lot of it is going to be me just fast forwarding it in time lapse, so you guys can see the full I guess process, if anything. So right now I am kind of just sketching over my rough kind of sketch because I find it a little bit easier this way. And like I said, I probably should have divvied it up so that I did maybe a few frames that I find the most important, get those sketched out and do the in-betweens after and kind of just tweak things as I go along. But because I didn't do that, there are going to be some inconsistencies here and there, but I did try my best. Like I should have mentioned this actually at the beginning. I'm not an animation person. I never took animation classes, nor have I done a lot of research into animation or anything like that. I just have a little bit of an interest in it. And maybe I should have talked about this probably in the beginning as well, is that the reason why I'm even doing this video, besides the fact that I saw my thumbnails in my OC folder, is two other things. So I've been making little shimijis of the Niji Sanji livers just like here and there. Right now I've only finished Ike, and then I finished a Quildren one, and I finished one for Reimu. And for Reimu's, I've had a cute little animation of her twirling for one of her kind of like multiplication transitions, I guess, and it's super cute but super simple. And another reason is that I was watching a stream that Ina was doing, and she was animating herself in a little pool floaty and like a summer outfit, and it was super cute. One day I would like to attempt doing animation in Clip Studio Paint, just for a little bit more easier access to layers and just like shortcuts that I find a little bit easier to do via the keyboard rather than just tapping on my screen. So now that we have the sketch for Masaki, at least the first frame kind of done, I'm going to kick it into time-lapse so that you guys can just breeze through the rest of the frames, because this took a little bit too long for me to sketch. So I think for the rough sketching portion, I took about 42 minutes because it was the footage that I lost. And then the other kind of rough sketch portion, or like this current sketching portion, I took about, I think, an hour and 45 minutes or so, around there. Anywhere between like an hour 45 to 2 hours is just me doing the sketching portion, and I'm basically sketching out kind of, I think it's 28-ish frames, maybe. And thank you to the people who reminded me that you can change one of your layers to be the background so that you don't have to copy and paste your background for every frame. I didn't find it as necessary for the previous one because that Masaki animation had very little frames compared to this one. This one has a lot more frames, and I felt a little bit more ambitious to do more frames like this just because I wanted to capture a little bit more movement, even though it feels very janky in some parts. I feel like a little bit later, you're gonna see that he doesn't feel like he's actually walking. He almost feels like sometimes he's skipping, and I don't know if it's the orientation of how I make his legs hit the ground, or like before they hit the ground, so they look like they kick out before he hits the ground. So it kind of looks like he skips forward rather than just like, you know, placing his foot moving forward kind of thing. Yeah, I should have probably also did a proper like turnaround of Masaki to get a good idea of his proportions before actually tackling this, because his proportions when he's in profile versus facing forward is quite different. And I think it's also because the way I draw profiles for my chibis tend to be a little bit, it tends to get a little weird just because where the neck sits between kind of like the front part of the face where the jaw is, and then where your ear is and the back of the skull tends to be like a vast width. Like it's a very big width because the head tends to be so huge, and I wanted to keep the body very small. But you'll see that once we get past the tripping frames, Masaki starts to get like very elongated, and I feel like it was better proportioned when he was elongated versus this squished down version. Maybe it's just my preference, but to me, I feel like I didn't keep it very consistent, if anything. So during these frames, sorry it's going by super fast, but basically I'm kind of like flipping through as much as I can also when I'm doing these frames, just to make sure that things are reading somewhat correctly. Even though like I don't have probably basic foundations for animation, I always heard from just like animation friends and like other people who have dabbled more into animation than I have, they've always said that even though if you have a good foundation in drawing doesn't mean you're going to be good at animating. And I find that very interesting, and I find it very true as well. So I definitely think if you're wanting to learn animation, definitely learn the basics, learn all the fundamentals and stuff, and you know, kind of get that down pat before doing something maybe too ambitious if you're kind of looking for a little bit more efficiency or something, or like continuity, I guess, for your stuff. Because for me, I don't mind if things look a little bit janky, because it's not going to be something for like a major project. It's not going to be something that I'm going to deem as like super professional or anything like that. It's kind of just for fun. And not like that, I don't think I would ever want to really make a actual animation of Masaki just, you know, crash and burn onto the floor like this. It's just for some reason my brain was thinking like this in the past, and I was down to animate it today. So that is what we're doing right now. So as I'm finishing up the sketch, we are going to kind of move along to the line art, and then we have to do coloring. So here's kind of a little clip of me showing you guys what the sketch looks like at this point, and then we are going to move on to the line art. But before that, you guys saw me that I was kind of getting rid of some of my layers. So just because the iPad and Procreate, depending on the model that you have and the amount of space you have, there's going to be a limit to your layers. So for me, I don't remember what exactly the layer limit was for mine, but I wanted to make sure to keep my layers to a minimum where I can. So I didn't show this entirely. I went ahead and deleted all my rough sketches. So it's like the little ball head with the dot eyes. All of those sketches I deleted. But don't worry, because of the type of person I am, I feel like I'm low-key a hoarder, or like I keep things quite a bit. I duplicated my file before moving on to the line art, and before I started to get rid of my rough sketch. So I actually have 3 different files of this particular animation file, at 3 different stages. So just because I want to be able to make sure that either I want to see just a rough sketch, so I have that still intact somewhere, or if I want to see just a kind of just a normal sketch, because at some point I'm also going to get rid of that once we finish the line art. So for the line art, brush wise, I actually just kept with the same sketching brush, and I'm just going to be a little bit more clean and making sure that I'm kind of keeping my lines less wiggly and just making sure that everything's kind of connected, so I can just bucket fill everything for the coloring stage, because coloring is going to be a painful process of just, I don't know, I feel like it would be a little bit faster in Clip Studio Paint if anything, or if my lines were a little bit cleaner, would have made the process a little bit faster, but you know, you can do what you can in Procreate, and I still think like animating in Procreate is super fun, especially because like you can do it on the go and you can do it just frame by frame. You can also like elongate the duration for the frames and stuff, and there's like a lot of things you could possibly play with, and has a lot of potential for animation from what I've seen other people do in Procreate. So now that we're in time-lapse mode for the line art portion, I'm going to be showing you guys basically how I tackle certain frames and why certain frames might look a little bit more blurry than the others. So for a lot of the frames where Masaki is going to be facing the same way, or his head's going to be more or less on the same plane, I am going to be copying and pasting those frames, and any fuzzy parts is me kind of rotating or transforming the face a little bit. And because I'm not working in a program that has the vector layers, I know it's probably mostly advised to use vector layers, or like any kind of layer that allows you to transform without losing the line quality or your image quality. I know that's to do kind of like, it's the best method to do it if you wish to resize your animation at some point. But because I'm working in Procreate and I don't think there's a possibility of that, I'm just gonna deal with the fact that parts are gonna look a tiny bit more blurry for some lines, but for the most part, I'm not gonna care about it too much. Like I said, this is for fun, and it's just kind of fun to learn new things as you go. And for me, because I'm not too fixated on making something super like polished or finished, it's just like, you know, I'm gonna learn very slowly and try to apply what I learn to new animations in the future. I know it's not the most efficient way of learning, but it's kind of like fun to dabble for certain things or certain mediums or whatever you want to do. So that's kind of like what I'm doing. I do the same thing with like pixel art, shimijis, anything like that. Even like video editing, it's just like small changes. I've also switched animation, or not animation programs, switched video programs. So I do apologize if some things feel a little bit more rough. I'm still learning this video program to kind of mimic how a lot of my old videos were still formatted. So please bear with the changes for a little bit. Hopefully it's not too noticeable, but yeah. So another thing I tried to keep in mind, besides the fact that I am trying to keep my line work very similar to my sketch, because my sketch isn't too rough, but there are parts that I feel like are very clear, so I want to make sure that things follow correctly. I also tried my best to give him a little bit more of like hair bouncing and stuff, but I feel like it's not super consistent or very noticeable. So you know, at this point I was mostly focusing on his legs and every so often the little leaves on the plant before we get to the tripping portion, and that's where I kind of get to line everything individually, and I don't have to copy and paste every layer and erase certain parts to make sure that things look consistent. Also at this point, I realized that the first frame had Masaki's apron pocket, and I mistaken it for another layer of the pot, so I had to go back in and put in the line for the pocket once again, and I had to make sure that I didn't color in the wrong part. Otherwise, the kind of like 2-tiered pot look will become 3-tier, and he loses a pocket at some point. So I'm trying my best to keep everything like consistent where I can. Maybe I'll leave you guys with the line art for a little bit, and I'll come back. Now we're kind of reaching the end portion of the line arting phase, and I'm going to talk about this probably a little bit more once we get to the color, because I'll probably show an example. But I did enjoy using my sketch brush as the line arting brush for the most part, and I'll show you guys a quick run through of the line art with the animation. There are some parts I still have to fix. I noticed I missed a few lines in his hair at the beginning, and I need to fix his apron a little bit in some areas. But for the most part, this is what I have. Now back to the brush. I noticed that I'm gonna have a little bit of an issue when it comes to coloring because of the texture of the brush is not like a solid fill. It's not super clean either. So when I start to drag and drop colors into certain parts, it becomes a little bit hard for me to make sure that things look super clean. Even though, like I said, I shouldn't focus too much on that. I should just focus on, you know, completing the product to a certain extent. So like, you know, for more learning purposes, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm going ahead and also deleting my sketches. Once again, I've already duplicated my file so that I could keep the kind of like the sketch and the line art as another file, and then this file I'll delete all my sketches, and then we'll just have the plain line art. So for the line art, in Procreate and a lot of different programs, you can actually set your line art or your folder or whatever you want to a reference layer. So in Procreate, I believe you can only set it to a specific layer and you cannot set it to a specific folder. So for the layer, I decided to set my line art to the reference so that I can go to a different layer and drag and drop colors so that it can be on a separate layer without me having to go back and forth to select on my line art layer to come back to my color layer. So yeah, that was kind of the zoom in, showing you guys where the kind of graininess of my sketching pencil that I used for both the line art and the sketching isn't like a solid fill, therefore that my edges and stuff won't be 100% clean, and it'll be very noticeable once I start to reuse some of the colors for different frames, because I'm just copying pasting this color frame or color portion to each different frame that has very similar kind of like body position, just because it's a lot easier. I also went ahead and made a color palette so it's much easier for me to color Masaki without having to run back and forth and, you know, color picking, going back to the new frame, dropping it, go back to the old frame, pick up a color, go back to the new frame, drop the color kind of thing. Now we're back in time lapse so that we can kind of breeze through the color. So I also forgot Procreate has this feature because I almost never use the palette kind of function or anything like that, but you can pull out your palette so that it can kind of float there while you work, because you notice that sometimes when I was dragging and dropping colors, my palette would disappear every time I make a mark on the canvas. But if you pop out your palette, it kind of becomes a floating window and it would always stay there while you work on your artwork or on the canvas. So it just makes the process a little bit easier for me to manage. But I still had issues with the coloring. So you can see that I accidentally changed the pot color to be the wrong color. I changed that pocket to be the pot color, so like things weren't reading correctly. And this is where I started to reuse a lot of my similar colors for certain frames, just because I was just kind of matching up the faces and matching up the hair to a certain point in the pot, and then after that I will kind of color pick and then kind of clean up around the edges to make sure that things look clean and they match certain areas more appropriately. So I'm just kind of shuffling Masaki across, and that's pretty much just the coloring portion. It becomes a lot easier when it becomes less similar frames for me, just because I hate doing this cleaning up portion, but it's just kind of more of the quickest way for me to do it rather than having to drag and drop every single time. There are going to be small inconsistencies once I start to add details for each of the frames, because I added details and I started copying pasting the coloring after the fact. Oh no, I copy and pasted before I added the extra stuff like highlights, shadows, cheeks, and I guess the eye colors. So there are going to be small inconsistencies here and there, but for the overall look, I still think it looks super cute and not too janky, if anything. But yeah, here's Masaki hitting the floor, dropping the pot, and then when I wanted him to have a little bit of a bounce onto the ground where his legs kick up before they come back down. I know there's a lot of terms for animation like easing and like in-betweens, and there's like a few other things that I should properly learn. And I bet if I did the bouncing ball assignment that a lot of people talk about, it probably give me a better idea how to do this. But one other thing I should have just like let me think about this. I should have looked up references or tried to find different ways to figure this out. I did not know how to make a person look like they tripped on themselves, like tripped on their 2 feet before hitting the ground. So it would have been nice to have some kind of reference material. Not sure where I would find it, but just things to think about for the future. So small things to change. So I went ahead and alpha locked every layer. So I alpha locked my color layer and the line art layer. So for the line art, I wanted to soften it up for the colors. So I changed everything to be a kind of more of a softer brown. And then near the face and the bangs, I kind of airbrushed almost a lighter brown just to make everything a little bit brighter near his face. I added the cheeks already in. I also changed the eye color to be a dark green. I'm also went ahead and changed his earrings on the, I guess the right side of his face, his ear, so that make sure that's all consistent as well. Then after that, I'm going back through my layers once again and adding in the green and the whites to his eyes so that he doesn't look super dead when he's walking across or, you know, waving to us and stuff. But once I finish the eyes and I kind of make sure that everything looks kind of correct, I made a new layer and I wanted to add kind of a screen layer to act as my highlight. And I was kind of playing around with the idea of how I wanted to do the highlight. I thought the circle ideas would look too inconsistent, so I decided to just do a small little bit of rim lighting to the top of his head and a little bit to the leaves and flower pot. And I was trying to figure out whether or not I wanted to do this by merging my layers and then adding the screen after so that it could change the color of the line work as well, but decided that it looks too faded, so I decided to keep all my line art on separate layers and then make sure to do the screen and clip it to just my colors. So I went ahead, did that, and I went through each individual layer. You can see I got lazy, so I started copying, pasting certain layers and just reusing them and adjusting where I need them to be. I found this way also makes it look a little bit less inconsistent for me. But then I noticed I forgot to do the potted plant, and so I had to go back again, find the layers that I didn't highlight the plant. And now I think after that I wanted one more layer, so I wanted to add a multiply layer. So every time I add like a screen layer or when I did any like additional layer, I will merge the layer to the color layer or to the line art layer before making it, like making a new layer, so that I can keep my layer management to a minimal number. So for Procreate, the reason why I in the beginning started to do more like digital painting and stuff is that I wanted to limit my layers. So even here I'm trying my best to kind of do a little bit of layer management, so I'm merging everything. So I got the multiply layer finished, and I just basically did under his neck. I did the little kind of part for his hair that kind of pops upwards so that there's more depth. I also did the back leg so that there's a little bit more depth as well, just because it is a little bit easier for me to see it as the further leg if it's kind of darker or in the back in some capacity, I guess. So I think that's it. I decided to change the frames per second to 5, and then I changed it to 6 because I think the faster speed looks a little bit better in my opinion. We'll see. I saved it as 6, I believe, for the final, so you guys will see that at the very end, where I saved them as GIFs so you guys can see each individual thing. I'll make sure to show the rough one, the line art, and the full version right at the end, as well as in here in Procreate, because like I said, I saved 3 different versions as you can see. So this is the line art version. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you guys next time in the next video. Bye!